This podcast contains real stories, information, and insights using Environics Analytics data and research. The hosts you hear are AI-generated voices, and any opinions or expressions may present errors or inaccuracies. This is our first experimental podcast, and we welcome your feedback. Please send them to us at info@environicsanalytics.com.
All right, let's dive into this MobileScapes thing. Looks like we've got a pretty hefty stack of info to sift through here. Articles, research papers, even some personal notes. Someone's been doing their homework.
Yeah, MobileScapes is definitely generating some buzz these days.
Well, let's unpack it then. I mean, I get that knowing where people go with their phones is valuable, but how valuable?
Oh, it's huge. Way bigger than just dots on a map, I promise.
Okay, good, because some of this stuff is a little over my head, not going to lie. Like, I saw an article you sent over about how using GPS data alone is becoming less reliable, especially here in Canada, where we're all about that privacy, right?
Oh, yeah. Canadians are way more likely to turn off location services compared to, say, our American neighbors.
Exactly. So if GPS is shaky, how's MobileScapes supposed to give us a clear picture?
Well, that's where things get interesting. They've figured out a way to combine different types of data to get a more complete picture.
Okay, break it down for me. What kind of data are we talking about?
So they use something called SDK data, which is super accurate location data that you opt into when you allow certain apps to track you.
Okay, so like when that fitness app wants to map my running route.
Exactly. But obviously not everyone's cool with that, right? So the sample size can be kind of limited.
Yeah, makes sense. So what's the other piece of the puzzle?
That's where cellular data comes in. Your phone's always pinging off cell towers, even if your location services are off.
So even if I'm being all stealthy, my phone's still leaving a trail of breadcrumbs.
Basically. It's less precise than GPS for sure, but the volume is massive. Covers a huge area.
So it's like if GPS is a zoom lens, super sharp but narrow view, cellular data is more like a wide-angle lens. A bit blurry, but you see the whole scene.
That's a great analogy. And MobileScapes is basically merging those two views together to give us a super detailed A&D comprehensive picture of how people are moving around.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
But let's be real, the whole tracking thing still kind of creeps me out, you know? Are we talking about following individual people here?
No, not at all. And trust me, they're very aware of the privacy concerns.
Okay, good. Because that was definitely top of mind for me when I was going through all this material. I mean, nobody wants to feel like they're being spied on.
Absolutely. It's more about seeing the overall flow, like rush hour traffic or crowds at a concert. You see the movement, but you don't know who each individual driver or concert goer is.
Okay, that makes me feel better. So it's anonymized then?
Completely. They're not interested in tracking individuals. It's all aggregated and anonymized data. Actually, they've gone above and beyond to prove their commitment to privacy. MobileScapes is ISO 3100 IO, Privacy by Design certified, which means they've built privacy into every single step of the process.
Seriously? That's impressive. So they're not just following the rule, they're setting a new standard.
Exactly. They're also compliant with GDPR and Quebec Law 25, so they're meeting international standards as well.
All right, so privacy concerns addressed. But aside from all that, what are we actually gaining from this data? What makes MobileScapes so special?
Well, for starters, the coverage is phenomenal. We're talking about data that spans the entire country, not just major cities.
I see. That's a big deal, especially in a country as vast and diverse as Canada.
Absolutely. And not only is the coverage impressive, but the data itself is less volatile than what you might see from other sources.
Less volatile. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah.
I'm not a data scientist, remember?
Oh, right. Sorry. Basically, it means the data is less likely to be skewed by one-off events. Like, imagine a big festival or a sudden road closure, right?
Yeah, I could see how that would mess things up.
Exactly. Those events create spikes or dips in the data that don't reflect the normal patterns. But because MobileScapes uses such a massive data set and combines multiple sources, it's way less susceptible to those fluctuations.
So it's more like looking at long-term weather patterns instead of checking the hourly forecast.
You got it. It's about understanding the consistent flow of activity, not just those fleeting moments. And that's incredibly valuable for businesses that need to plan ahead, like, managing inventory or staffing or marketing campaigns.
Okay, I'm starting to get the big picture here. We're talking about insights that go way beyond just knowing where people are at any given moment. This is about understanding trends, predicting behavior, and making smarter decisions.
Exactly. It's about seeing those long-term patterns and factoring them into your planning.
Okay, that's all super interesting, but I'm a show me, don't tell me kind of guy. Do we have any real-world examples of how companies are actually using MobileScapes?
Oh yeah, tons. We can definitely dive into some case studies. Want to hear about how Adidas used it to navigate the post-pandemic retail world?
Let's do it.
Oh, Adidas is a great example. They were, they were hit hard by the pandemic, like a lot of retailers.
Yeah, makes sense. Suddenly everyone's shopping online, nobody's going to stores. It was a crazy time.
Yeah, and they needed to make some big decisions about like where to invest, what to change, but they didn't want to just guess.
Of course not. You can't just fly blind in a situation like that.
Yeah.
So how did MobileScapes help?
They actually combined it with another tool from Environics Analytics called Prism. It gives you all this detailed demographic and lifestyle information about Canadians.
Oh yeah, Prism. I've heard of that. It's those categories they use in marketing reports, right? Like urban professionals or suburban empty nesters.
Exactly. So by combining MobileScapes data with those Prism segments, Adidas could see who was visiting their stores, but also like what kind of people they were, what their lifestyles were like.
Ah, I see. So it's not just about the raw numbers. It's about understanding the context, the why behind the where.
Exactly. And that's what allowed them to make some really smart decisions. Like they were able to pick the best locations for new stores, tailor their marketing to specific groups, even adjust their product offerings based on what they learned about their customers.
So they basically use data to get ahead of the curve instead of just reacting to the chaos.
Right. And it worked. They saw a big increase in foot traffic, employees were more confident in the brand, and customers responded well to the more personalized approach.
That's a pretty impressive turnaround. I'm sensing a theme here. It seems like MobileScapes is giving companies this almost unfair advantage.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. And it's not just for retail either.
Oh yeah, totally. What about other industries? One of the articles mentioned a real estate company using it.
Oh yeah, Colliers, they're a big player in commercial real estate.
Yeah.
And they were trying to figure out how to evaluate properties in this whole work from home world, which is a nightmare, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Suddenly everyone's got a home office, so what even IS prime real estate anymore?
Right. So Colliers used this tool called Footfall, which is actually built on MobileScapes data.
Okay, and footfall. What does that tell you?
It gives you all these prepackaged insights about foot traffic patterns, like how many people are visiting different properties, when they're going, where they're coming from. All that stuff.
Ah, so instead of just guessing about which locations are hot, they had actual numbers to back it up.
Exactly. And that data was super helpful for them in negotiating deals, justifying rents, and guiding their clients toward the best investments.
Okay, so another example of MobileScapes taking the guesswork out of decision-making. I like it. But I'm also curious about applications that are less about profits and more about, I don't know, the bigger picture maybe.
Oh, you mean like using the data to understand how people are using public spaces or, things like that?
Yeah, exactly. One of the articles talked about the city of Ottawa using MobileScapes to study museum visitors.
Oh, yeah, that's a really cool example. They wanted to see who was coming to their museums and where they were coming from.
I wouldn't have thought of using this kind of data for museums, to be honest. I mean, it seems pretty high-tech for such a traditional space.
Right. But it's actually super useful for them. They were able to see that their audience was way more diverse and spread out than they thought. It wasn't just locals popping in.
So they were getting visitors from all over the place. That's impressive.
Yeah, and they used that information to improve their marketing, make the signage better around the city, even tweak their programming to appeal to different groups.
Ah, so they're making the museums more accessible and engaging for everyone. I like that. Okay, so we've seen how MobileScapes can help businesses make money, make smarter decisions, and even connect with people in new ways. I'm sold. But how do I get my hands on this magical data? Is it like top secret or something?
Not at all. It's surprisingly accessible. They've got a few different options depending on your needs.
Okay, lay it on me.
So if you're a visual person, they have this platform called Envision. It's all about exploring the data through interactive maps and charts.
Yeah, I can see how that would be helpful for getting a sense of the big picture. What if you're more of a techie, though?
Then you'd probably love their API. It's basically a direct line to the data that you can plug into your own systems and programs.
So a DIY option for the coders and data analysts out there. What if you just need some quick and easy insights?
Well, they have their Footfall product, which we talked about earlier. That gives you pre-aggregated data extracts, so it's a simpler option if you don't need the full fire hose of data.
Okay, so there's an entry point for everyone, from casual users to serious data nerds.
Nice. But before we all rush out to download this data, are there any, caveats or warnings we should be aware of?
That's a great question. It's important to use the data responsibly and ethically.
Absolutely. We don't want to get carried away and start making decisions based on faulty data.
Right. So one thing to be aware of is sample size. If you're looking at a tiny area or a short time frame, the data might not be as reliable.
Makes sense. You need a big enough sample to draw meaningful conclusions.
Exactly. You also need to be careful about context. Like, if you're analyzing data for a giant stadium, a single event could really throw things off. So don't freak out if you see a huge spike in foot traffic on Super Bowl Sunday. It's not necessarily a trend.
Right. And then there's the issue of new locations. If a business just opened or changed hands, it takes time for the data to catch up.
Okay, so be patient and don't jump to conclusions based on incomplete data. Got it. Any other words of wisdom?
Well, just remember that data accuracy can vary in areas with spotty cell service.
So if you're in the middle of nowhere, take the data with a grain of salt.
Exactly. It's all about understanding the limitations of the data and using it in a way that's smart and ethical.
Great advice. This has been a really fascinating conversation. I'm starting to see the world in a whole new way. But I'm curious, what gets you most excited about MobileScapes? What's the thing that really makes you go, wow, about this technology?
For me, it's the potential to solve really complex problems. This data can help us make better decisions about everything from urban planning to healthcare to transportation. I mean, imagine a world where we can use this data to reduce traffic congestion or prevent disease outbreaks.
Yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing stuff. It's not just about tracking movements. It's about using that information to make the world a better place.
Exactly. That's what gets me fired up.
Okay, so we've talked about what MobileScapes ISS. We've seen how companies are using it today. But now I want to look ahead. What's next for this whole mobile movement data thing?
Honestly, we're just getting started. Like, we're barely scratching the surface of what's possible.
Okay, that's exciting, but also kind of vague. Give me something concrete. What trends are you watching?
Well, one thing that's super interesting is the way this data is starting to be combined with other types of data. Like, we talked about Prism, right? Which adds that demographic layer.
Right, like knowing whether someone's an urban hipster or a suburban soccer mom.
Exactly. But now imagine adding in things like social media activity or purchase history or even like weather patterns.
Whoa, hold on. That's a lot to process. But I see where you're going. If you can connect all those dots, you can start to see some pretty wild patterns.
Exactly. And the tools for analyzing all that data are getting better all the time, too. Like AI and machine learning, that stuff's evolving so fast.
So we're not just drowning in data, we're actually learning how to swim in it.
Exactly. We'll be able to spot trends and make predictions way beyond what we can do now. Like, imagine going from understanding what happened to actually predicting what will happen.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. Give me a real-world example. What kind of predictions are we talking about?
Okay, let's say you're in charge of transportation for a big city. Right now, you're probably using data to analyze traffic patterns, right? But imagine being able to predict where those bottlenecks are going to form before they even happen.
Oh, wow. So you could adjust traffic signals or bus routes in real time to keep things moving smoothly.
Exactly. Or think about public health. Imagine using movement data to identify areas where a disease outbreak might be about to happen based on travel patterns and social interactions.
So instead of reacting to an outbreak, you could potentially stop it before it even starts.
Exactly. That's the kind of power we're talking about. And it's not just limited to those examples either. Every industry is going to find ways to use this data to be more proactive and efficient.
It's almost a little scary to think about how much potential this data has, but all this power.
Yeah.
It comes with responsibility, right?
Oh, absolutely. We need to be having some serious conversations about ethics and privacy. Like, how do we use this data for good without crossing any lines?
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to live in a world where every move is being tracked and analyzed.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between innovation and protecting people's rights. We got to be careful not to get so caught up in the what that we forget about the why.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've explored the past, present, and future of MobileScapes. We've seen how powerful this data can be, but also how important it is to use it wisely. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive as much as I have. It's been an incredible journey. And for our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.